Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our morning Srimad Bhagavatam class at the Bhakti Center. Akiko, good morning. Good morning, Angel. Good morning, Andrea. Good morning, Emily. Hare Krishna. Good morning, Henry. Jamuna Jayanti. Good morning. Is that Jamuna Jaya? Jayanti? Matthew, good morning. And good morning, Pat. And people are still joining. Ghanashyam Prabhu is with us today. He's a chaplain, right? Ghanashyam Prabhu, could you tell us your official title?
Hospice chaplain.
Hospice chaplain. That's very strong words. Hospice chaplain. Very grave. But Ghanashyam Prabhu is getting paid for being an angel. That's a pretty extraordinary and very fortunate position for a devotee to have. So Ghanashyam Prabhu, we can't wait to hear glorification of Krishna from you. Thank you for being with us today. Hare Krishna. Would you like me to share screen or you want to share your screen?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
You can share the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, so grateful to be with all of you this morning. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is 9th canto, chapter 19, text 18. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 9, chapter 19, which is entitled King Yayati Achieves Liberation. Text 18. Purnam Varsha Sahasram Me Vishayan Sevato Sakrit Tatapi Chanusavanam Trishna Teshu Pajayate. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So King Yayati is speaking here. I have spent a full 1,000 years enjoying sense gratification. Yet my desire to enjoy such pleasures increases daily. And a very short purport. Maharaj Yayati is explaining in terms of his actual experience how strong are sexual desires even in old age. Nityan timarandasya gananjana shalakaya chakshurun militam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha Shri Chaitanya manobishtam stapitam yena bhutale swayam rupa kadamayam dadati svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinobandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Beg for the blessings of the assembled devotees. Adipurusha Prabhu asks for your blessings that we can say something for the benefit of the devotees here. May it be for the pleasure of Shishi Radha Mulidhar, and may our words also be aligned with Guru Parampara. Hare Krishna. So again, Canto 9, Chapter 19, entitled King Yayati Achieves Liberation. Text 18. Here's the verse again. I have spent a full 1,000 years enjoying sense gratification, yet my desire to enjoy such pleasure increases daily. So this is the story of how a person finally comes to the end point of material life. Sometimes people say that where material life ends, then spiritual life actually begins. It's not always that way. We can begin our spiritual life even when we're fully in the midst of just kind of material life and strivings and attachments. But there is something to be said about getting a certain realization from material life. We have to get the fruit of material life before we enter spiritual life. What is the fruit of material life? It's a realization of the futility of material life. That's the fruit. King Yayati, for many, many years, you would think if you're enjoying sense gratification for many, many, many years, then it'll start to decrease, right? Your desire for it. But he's saying the opposite here in this verse. Trishna te shupa jayate, that my thirst is only increasing for it. Prabhupada often gives that example of an old man that Prabhupada said, I have seen this with my own eyes, or maybe not seen it, but Prabhupada would say this, I know he would give this example often, that an old man, even though his body's deteriorating and he's becoming so old, still he's going to the nightclub at night to see the women. It's like the body can't even enjoy it anymore, but we still have the habit, the inclination that we've cultivated for so long that we still go in that direction, even when I can't get the pleasure from it in my body. So what do we do about this? Finally, something takes place within the person after, enjoying, sense gratification for so long. King Yayati is saying, Sukadeva Goswami in the first verse, he finally shows what takes place within the heart of Yayati that helps him. Many, many years have passed of him enjoying. And then what happened? Sukadeva Goswami says, Bhutva. Finally, some wisdom awakened in the heart of King Yayati. He gives two things that happened. Bhutva, some wisdom finally came into the heart. And also nirvino. Simultaneously with that wisdom, some detachment came into the heart. And what was that wisdom? As we mentioned, seeing the futility of all of my own attempts to satisfy myself. King Yayati had to admit, after everything, he had to honestly admit that I'm still empty-handed. After everything I tried to enjoy, after every way that I went to get my own satisfaction and peace, I finally must admit that I really don't have it. I don't have that peace. I don't have that satisfaction that I sought. I'm defeated. We have to be defeated by Krishna. But if we look carefully, to be defeated by Krishna, it's not necessarily being morose or downcast or depressed, but we have to be gratefully defeated. Gratefully defeated. that God has actually brought me to this realization. King Yayati's realization in these verses, he's lamenting, looking back at his life. But he's also in a new place and he's grateful to be there. His lamentation is not like, I tried so hard for so long and I have nothing and that's it. And now I'll die. He's realizing Krishna brought me to this place of getting this buddha, this wisdom, this realization that there's nothing there. There's no way I can actually change myself or satisfy myself. Krishna, only you can change me. So therefore, I surrender unto you fully now. With this realization, with this gratitude for you having brought me to this realization, Krishna. Now I realize only you can change me. I surrender unto you. So this surrender, it's like a newly awakened attitude within a devotee. And it's born from realization. It's not necessarily shown outwardly. A devotee can come to this internal realization and just go on as before, still going on with your duties, your family, but there's a kind of sacred secret within the heart of a devotee who actually goes through this, gets this realization, gets this jewel that I can't actually satisfy myself. I don't know what to do. I have no power for that. But Krishna has given me this realization. Krishna has been there all along, helping me come to this point. And now I'll surrender to him again and again in moments in my life. I keep surrendering, keep having that attitude of surrender. So we have to be gratefully defeated by the Lord. Some people are defeated by the Lord, but they're not grateful. They're bitter. You can get defeated by the material energy, become resentful of the Lord. But imagine if you can get these realizations, which are sometimes hard, that I cannot do anything. I cannot save myself, right? And yet you feel gratitude for it. Krishna has given me this realization. Krishna was there all along, wanting me to have this realization. So, must it take many, many, many years to get this realization like Yayati? Is there something we can do to accelerate this process? Well, yes, just as Shukadeva Goswami says, Buddha, there has to be some understanding that comes. Why do we get so addicted to sense gratification? To really understand things properly, you always have to go back to the beginning, because then you see the picture of what's happened. Why do we get so addicted to sense gratification? So from the very beginning, what happened? The spirit soul falls away. The spirit soul forgets its eternal shelter with Krishna. And the spirit soul wants to make an experiment with other kinds of ways of living. We separate from Krishna. And then we fall into the material energy. And because we've lost that divine shelter, then we need something. We need some substitute shelter. And we look for the closest and most immediate thing to get it. Right? So when you fall away from the Lord, when you forget the Lord, then there's a lack in the heart. There's something missing. And the mistake we make is that we then immediately find some other shelter to get some relief. Right? We're looking for another shelter. It's the whole issue. The whole thing is the whole problem is this issue of the true shelter versus false shelters. And when it's a false shelter, what happens? Whatever we get into, whatever it may be, that thing starts to get into us. Think about it, like anything, any kind of addiction. We all have addictions, actually. Addiction doesn't just mean addiction to a drug. Some people are, addicted to sports. Some people are addicted to food. Some people are addicted to sex. Some people are addicted to music, even entertainment. Some people are addicted to just internet. Some people are addicted to other people. Some people are addicted to books. It doesn't matter, actually, because whatever draws your attention away, whatever pulls you and draws your attention away from yourself, from this higher reality of what has happened and why, whatever we get into, the spirit of that thing gets into us, and then there becomes like a dependent relationship. I get a little relief from that thing, but then what happens? It wears off, and then I'm worse than before. And again, that need comes up again, it rises up, and then I go back to it for more relief. It gets into me a little deeper. And then the need comes up again after it wears off, and I go back to it again, and it gets in deeper. And in this way, we become locked. Isn't it amazing? We're spirit souls, part and parcel of Krishna. And we get completely controlled by like a material object, maybe, a drug, this little drug, this whatever it may be, or this thing I want to see or touch or taste. It totally controls me. But I'm a spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. How did this happen? It's because I've gone to that thing for shelter. And then it gets in me. And then I need it again. And I need it again. It pretends to be a friend, right? Because we do get some relief. But then we're worse off later. This is like a cycle, the cycle of addiction. For King Yayati, it was sex. He was, for so long, this was an inclination of his. And then he was cursed that it would be taken away, and he would become old and unable. And he was so attached that he shamelessly approached his son and said, "You take this curse." He requested of him that you become old and let me stay youthful so that I can continue to enjoy. It just shows how much he was under the control. And it can be anything. We have to see, we hear the word addiction or drug. A drug can be anything because it all has the effect of a drug. Where do I go for that sense gratification to get that relief? I had a friend in college who was addicted to heroin. And I remember that he had stopped for several months, and he was just suffering for having stopped, but he was trying. He was really, because it was ruining his life. Again, it's amazing how this one substance can just turn your whole life upside down, and with family and with friends. And he had kind of turned from everybody because of this addiction. But anyway, for a few months, he was trying to stop. And, he was living there on campus as I was. So I went to see him one day just to check in on him and see how he was doing. And I walked into the room and I saw him right after he had shot up heroin again. And it was, when I saw his face and saw him, it was like, he was like so euphoric because for so many months of not going in that direction, he broke. He couldn't stop anymore, and he shot up heroin. And I saw him completely, almost like peaceful and strong and like back to his health from the heroin, because he's gone to it so long. And when it's like you become a god when you actually go to sense gratification. That sense gratification that gives you relief, you become like a god. Enjoyment, you feel it. You feel like a different being. That's the addiction, you see, to be like God, to play God, to enjoy in that way. And of course, that wears off. So you go from feeling like a god, and then what do you feel like after? Sometimes, then you feel more guilty. Then you feel like a devil. And then that cry comes out again for some relief. And then you go back to it again. And again, a few moments of feeling like a god. And then that wears off, and then you feel more like a devil. And so we get totally bound. And then we try to solve this problem. How do we solve this problem? We go somewhere else. We go to another shelter that may give some relief. Maybe not the same shelter anymore. But now, okay, I stopped this. I stopped drinking alcohol, but now I need to smoke cigarettes. I go to the shelter of cigarettes. I stop cigarettes. Now I go to the shelter of food or something else, whatever it may be. And it looks like progress. We're helping ourselves maybe less destructive. We go to something less destructive. And this may all be necessary sometimes when it goes so deep, right? When the addiction goes so deep. But at the same time, it's still the wrong shelter. It's still not going to solve the problem. So we're trying to conquer over nature. We're trying to conquer over material nature by our own power. We're trying to conquer things from below, but the only way to overcome sense gratification is when the solution comes from above. Because above is connecting us to the real shelter. That is the Krishna, the Ashraya. This word in Sanskrit, Ashraya, means shelter. This whole topic. This is Ashraya Tattva, the truth of the shelter, of the true shelter. What is that true shelter? We've become addicted to it being sense gratification in so many forms. What is it for me? We have to discover that. And then we have to see how it's controlling me. And we want to keep our eyes open to what's happening. So what do we do then? Because some of these attachments are so strong. This is what I humbly suggest or recommend. Don't make an immediate vow to give it up, first of all. Don't just say from today on, never again, I'll stop, I'll never do this thing again that has bound me. We have to take it a little slower than that. Because what happens? Then we give it up for a few days and then we go back and feel more guilty. And then we do that again. How many times do we play that game? Okay, I'm stopping this now. Maybe somebody can stop something. And if you can, that's good. But if I'm talking about if you can't, and it seems like you've tried many times. So you can go back into that habit, whatever it is. Okay. But stay awake. Because what happens with addictions is that we want to shut off and forget the truth. We want to move away from the truth of ourselves and what we're doing. And we try to make excuses or we justify it, this particular habit. Don't do that. Just be very honest. You can still do the thing. Say you're addicted to smoking cigarettes. So you can't stop it with the snap of your fingers, right? Okay, so now when you smoke a cigarette, stay awake. Realize what you're doing and just do it. Allow for it. Realize what you're doing and why you've become. Don't make an excuse for it and say it's fine or justify it in some way. And even you can taste it. Be very, very aware and awake of the taste. Because what you're doing is you're staying conscious. Because when we get addicted to sense gratification, we go unconscious. And that's the danger. We forget everything. We want to forget everything to get relief. But what if you were to fully just stay conscious and awake through what you're doing? You know, whatever the habit, you can continue on for now. Maybe you can't just completely stop it, but stay awake, stay conscious, because what happens is when you're staying awake and you stay conscious and you're committed to staying awake and conscious, then Krishna can kind of guide you through that because you're awake. You're not trying to forget him. You're not trying to forget yourself. You're not trying to forget the problem that you're in the middle of. And from being awake, some little hint can come, some little guidance, some little light can shine on the situation. And you'll start to see, because the more conscious we are, the more we'll realize these things aren't actually satisfying me deeply. Why do I do it? I don't want to do it anymore. That realization will come if you stay conscious. But if you go into habits like this, let me just close my eyes, let me forget everything, let me get into this, let me really get into this thing or this person, whatever it is. Let me get really into it and shut out everything else. That's the danger, because we want to forget the truth. We want to forget what's really going on. We want to forget how attached I actually am. So we go into it awake and just simply have the desire, I want to overcome this. That's all. You don't have to feel intense guilt. You don't have to resent yourself for what you're doing. You have to admit, I can't change myself. The change can only come if I somehow contact the grace of God. The change has to come from above, not from anything below. So you can enter into things, continue. So if there's some habit that you're struggling with, don't take a vow to stop it immediately. Okay, if it's too strong. If you can, great. But if whatever it may be, cigarettes, coffee, food, you sometimes even we eat to forget the guilt, to forget so many things, to forget what's happening. But instead, stay conscious, taste it, and just be awake to what's happening. Taste the food, notice what you're doing with this particular habit. I know it sounds a little strange, but we normally don't get this advice. We're just told to not do it, right? But is that helping? Have we changed from just being told not to do it? Or do we go back in different ways? Or have we substituted that bad habit with another bad habit? That's all you can do on the material level. You can only substitute one shelter for another shelter for another shelter, because we're not going to the real shelter, the real solution. We're not discovering the real cause of addiction. What is the real cause of addiction? It's connected to Krishna, actually. There's a return to Krishna that will actually solve these issues. But we have to take our time, be a little patient with yourself. Don't resent yourself. Even go back into the habit if you need to, but now stay awake. Don't make excuses. Don't justify it. Don't explain that it's fine. Don't be afraid to just go through it and stay awake. And by shining, by staying awake and alert, then we're more open and receptive to a little guidance from Krishna. And then we'll see one day, by going back to it again and again, staying conscious, you start to lose your taste for it. Because it doesn't have taste truly. It has a little relief in the beginning, but it's making us more unhappy. But if you're awake, you can start to realize that if you want to use it as a way of escaping reality, you shut down and forget about the whole thing, then you'll never come to that realization. So here, Shukadev Goswami says, what happened to Yayati after many, many years of enjoying? It wasn't going away through those years, all those years. But something, Buddha, some intelligence, some awakened wisdom came into his heart. From the Lord gives that wisdom. Krishna starts to give some power to you that you can overcome. He starts to show you something. He starts to show you that you're harming yourself, actually. That's not our realization. But if we want it, if we go into the thing that we're doing, to the addiction, whatever it may be. And again, don't think the addiction is some heavy thing. Don't think addiction doesn't apply to you. We all have addictions in different forms. Where do I go? It can be books. It can be sports. It can be music. Sometimes you turn on music and then you get into it. That shouldn't happen either. You shouldn't really get into the music. Because why? We want to escape again. We want to forget. We want to forget something very deep. But you can hear music. You can listen to music and be fine, but don't allow yourself to just lose consciousness. That's what a drug does, right? A drug is that you go to it so that you can just lose consciousness, shut off, and then finally you're relaxed. But no, you're not relaxed. You're relaxed for a few moments and then you're worse off. Then you're feeling more guilty, more pain. So and the other thing, and I'll end with this and we'll see if there's any comments or questions, but the other thing is that if you stay conscious and keep returning to the Lord for guidance, for shelter in your heart, you can do this. Take shelter of devotees, be in good association. All of these things will help. But still, we have to admit that there's gonna be an emptiness that comes upon you when you don't reach out for the shelter that you're used to. You're gonna start to feel a little empty. But you have to go through that. You have to endure that emptiness. You have to endure that little pain that's there. You see, we keep making the mistake. We feel empty, and then I need again. I got to fill it. I got to fill it with something. I got to distract myself from that somehow. But what if you just sat there and you just allowed yourself to endure it, realizing that you're letting something die within you? But if you let that thing die, that thing that's inside of us that just wants to take and enjoy for itself, it's going to be a little difficult. But if you can be determined, I'm going to endure this. I'm going to trust. And maybe sometimes we fail and we go back to that thing. But then again, you stay awake. Stay awake at what's happening.
I have to run. Right.
Priti, I think you've become. Oh, thank you. So sorry, I was absorbed in that. Now I forgot my train of thought. But if you allow yourself to endure it, understanding what's happening, if you could just endure it a little bit, then something that was reaching out, that's crying out for enjoyment, that thing will start to die down. It will weaken. And then there's still a cry. There's still a cry there in the soul, and that's a cry for Krishna. We're not meant to cry out for sense gratification. When you cry out for sense gratification, it arrives and it comes to you. Here I am, I'm your shelter. And we're fooled in that way. So allow that to endure the pain of that a little bit, and then know that the cry that you have is actually a cry for Krishna. And now direct it to Krishna. Krishna, save me. I've tried for so long to overcome these things. I can do nothing. Without you, I cannot do it. I can only substitute one shelter for another, make little modifications, but I really can't overcome this. I'm totally trapped. But I cry out to you, more and more come into my life, show me, guide me, lift me back up, place me at your, Lord Chaitanya says, place me at your lotus feet. So this is the cry. This is how you're meant to cry. Cry to above, not below. If we cry to the things below, they trap us and we become destroyed by it. So you have to tolerate a little bit the pain of letting go of that. Whatever the habit is, the addiction is, you stay conscious of what's happening and why, turning to Krishna, and also tolerating a little bit that urge to just pull it into me. I want it back into me, that thing, but then it gets into me deeply again. So tolerate, endure a little bit some of that. And then what will happen with time, you'll start to lose the taste, and you'll start to get Krishna's helping you lose the taste. He's giving you some wisdom, and he's also giving you a little strength to endure more and more each time. And one day you're going to wake up in the morning, and that thing that has controlled you for so long, it might even surprise you. You could just be done with it. It can just be over. And somehow you're not sure how it happened, but it happened because you're willing to stay conscious and awake to the truth. You're willing to do your part in enduring the pain of letting something go. And Krishna is pleased with that. And you've been taking shelter of Krishna throughout this process, and he's giving you some, by his power is entering into you, and then you can overcome it. That's actually what's happening. And then the gratitude we feel that we're gradually overcoming these little habits, these little issues. We see Krishna is doing this within me. how beautiful is that? How wonderful is that? Your faith in Krishna will be real. Yeah, nothing theoretical here. This is a life-changing experience, and you know it's coming from God because you know you have no power to change yourself. So this is the lesson here in this pastime, King Yayati. He achieves liberation, the name of this chapter. Why does he achieve liberation? Many, many years of enjoying sense gratification. In this verse, he said the desire was only increasing, actually. But something finally came upon him. He was a devotee. He had some connection. Something finally came upon him. Some buddva nirvino, some realization that was provided by the Lord, and some detachment was awakening, naturally awakening. And then what happens? How does this story end? Then he's able to fix his mind completely on the Lord. He goes to the supreme shelter, the original shelter, the real shelter. He returns to that shelter. So as he comes to the supreme shelter, and he achieves liberation. So we'll end here. We have a few minutes, but yeah, see if there's any comments, questions. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu. Wonderful presentation. Krishna is the doer, and when we tolerate the urge, then Krishna is pleased. That's so wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, devotees, go ahead. There's no theory here, just applied practical knowledge.
I gotta pop on because I'm about to get on the train. Thank you so much, Ghanashyam. You are always such a balm to the soul, and this was exactly what I needed to hear today. And I love that cry out to above and not below. That is like burned into my consciousness. So thank you so much. And Ananda Bihari is right. You are an angel, and you always have been to me. So thank you so much today. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Jamuna Jaya. I don't know what I'm doing or why. I'm just Krishna. I'm nothing, but thank you. But I'm happily nothing. It's the mercy of the devotees, you know, these insights and these things, the devotees, it's all coming from devotees in Krishna. We just have to realize that we are nothing, and then we can do nothing to help ourselves. And then when that realization is there, then as I was describing, then you're starting to become receptive to the truth, Krishna revealing the truth within you, and the devotees, their words penetrating your heart so that you actually can understand them. Yes, anyone else?
Hare Krishna, Ghanashyam Prabhu. Thank you so much for this class. One thing that really, really stood out to me was your point about just remaining conscious and keeping the eyes open during these acts of sense gratification, bad habits or addictions, and letting the consciousness stay open for Krishna to start working through the heart. So my question is kind of this experience that in Christianity, there's this really deep understanding that we can never be perfect. And so whereas kind of in our path, we are aiming at some level of perfection that qualifies us to actually serve Krishna. And so sometimes I see that, at least for myself, I can kind of get in this mindset of being very difficult on myself to just be more pure and more pure and more pure. And actually I end up burning out a little bit when I get so fine-tuned on these kind of like seemingly small habits, although I still have big bad ones. But could you speak a little bit about kind of the balance of striving for perfection and also self-acceptance and like true humility?
Very nice question. Very important question. Christianity, real Christianity does tell us to become perfect. Jesus says to his disciples that you should become perfect like your Father in heaven. And we also hear about the pure devotee, the perfection of the pure devotee. But the problem is, it's not by our efforts. We can't perfect ourselves. We have to try. We have to try. We're instructed to try. But the perfection takes place when we're open to the grace of the Lord. It's Krishna who perfects us. And that's why we have to lose this idea that I can perfect myself. And that's what's causing all the resentment towards myself, because I'm failing. It's trying to solve the problem from below, from myself. But it's a tricky thing, because we have to try from ourselves. We have to do our duty. Trying to perfect yourself, try to see it like a duty, but realize that it's not going to be by your effort, by your power, by your intelligence, by your ability that it's finally going to happen. So you go on doing your duty, but don't resent yourself because you can't change yourself. That's the important realization that has to come upon us. I can't do it, but I've been told to work on this, to work on that. I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to cry out to the Lord. And once the Lord becomes pleased with us, and he just sees the sincerity of the effort, and more he starts to enter into us and starts to change us from within. He changes us. He perfects us. Right? Just think, the Lord is doing everything. He's the controller of the whole creation. It's not hard for him to just perfect his soul, his part and parcel once again. And actually, we're already there. We're just disconnected from it, and we've forgotten it. And Krishna can just turn it around. But certain things are required for us. But what's not required for us is for me to perfect myself. So drop the resentment of yourself, knowing that you can't do it, but yet you're still told to try. So it's tricky, right? It's like we have to try, but not be attached to the results and to expecting some change from myself. It's more, what's really going on is just, it's a sincerity in the heart that wants to change that Krishna notices. You may fail. That's okay. Krishna forgives you immediately. Actually, he never leaves the state of forgiving Krishna. You know, it's us. We think that like, oh, I failed. And then we feel guilty for ourselves. We feel guilt. Krishna's not judging us. He's just waiting. Okay. Then again, we come back with some sincerity. We try it again. If we resent ourselves every time we're not becoming, you know, perfect, or we're failing in different ways, it's really, it's harmful. It makes it worse. So do your best and let go of the self-resentment. Stay open, stay conscious, stay awake to what's happening and why. Keep going on with your duty, like a job, you know, maybe you don't love your job, but you keep showing up, you do your best, you do it with integrity, you know, so. And then it's not just that either, too. We also want to bring some heart into things, like in our practice, in our devotional life, our devotional activities. But again, it's just by the sincerity of the soul that wants to do what's necessary from our side, but it's going to be Krishna who really perfects us. And perfection is the goal. But don't think that we can do it ourselves. And so we want to become perfect. We are perfect, you know, and there's different ways of understanding perfect, but it just means that we're totally in love with the Lord, and that love for the Lord, when we look upon other living beings, it takes a form of compassion for all living beings. That's perfect, that you love God with all your heart, completely. You're in love with God, and you have compassion towards every other living being, and therefore you have a spontaneous desire to serve, to constantly serve, to serve more and more, because you're like in an ocean of love, and you're getting so much that you also want to give so much, and you become addicted. This is the good addiction. You can become addicted to giving, to serving. And every time you give and serve, you're actually getting more. You know, giving and receiving become one on the spiritual platform, which means if you truly give in the right way, you immediately receive also. And if you truly receive in the right way, you're also giving something out. If you know how to receive God's love, you're simultaneously giving it out, actually. So on the material level, all these truths that are one, they become two and broken apart. And we, you know, giving and receiving are two different things. Well, I do this, I do that, and we go back and forth. But on the spiritual level, they unify. And as soon as you actually give in the right way, you're also receiving from Krishna. he's reciprocating. And as soon as you receive from Krishna, you're also giving to Krishna and giving to others. That's the miraculous possibility for all of us. I hope something there was helpful. Anyone else? Bhima Prabhu, it's great to see you.
Hare Krishna, Ghanashyam. How are
Hare
you
Krishna.
doing?
I'm
Obviously
doing great.
wonderful. I remember meeting you for the first time. Geez, what, 10 years ago or something? We've only seen each other half a dozen times, but you've always been, as with a lot of the devotees, seeing so rarely under Radhanath Maharaj's guidance. You're like little brothers and sisters, but I'm so jealous because you've all gone on to take up the Radhanath and Prabhupada's mission of being sweet, of being so intelligent, of engaging in an open-minded and variegated ways in disseminating this Krishna consciousness. The Bhakti Center is just one big open heart. In the Catholic Church, it's called the Sacred Heart, the love of the Sacred Heart. You had mentioned at the beginning of your lecture, the sacred secret. And I think that's very pertinent and a very good way to remember how we can always carry Krishna within our heart. And yet we don't have to be so demonstrative as to be pretentious or to throw the wet towel of our preaching at other people, but by showing, as my wife always says when she upbraids me, which is you must embody the philosophy before you speak it. So what you do, you are a counselor, right? A counselor for the hospitals.
Yes.
Do you do hospice work? Do you do hospice work?
Yes, hospice.
Oh, that's unbelievable. There's nothing more important. There's so many. I've had recently some in-laws and some friends who have gone to meet their maker, so to speak. And there is no more open time, no more fertile ground than to introduce the love of Krishna at that time, because everybody reaches out desperately. After all, you mentioned addictions. We are in this material world because we are addicted to material nature. We ask to play with Maya, and Maya is batting us around like a cat. So I really appreciate, and I just wanted to say hello, Hare Krishna, and nice to see you. And I'm so glad that I was invited to participate in these Bhagavatam classes. So Hare Krishna to
Hare
you,
Krishna,
Prabhu,
Bhima
and hope to
Prabhu.
see you soon. Hare Krishna.
Hope to see you soon as well. And
Yes.
Wow, everything you say is full of such insight and wisdom. We want to hear more from you. I mean, you can tell by your words how much you are,
In pain.
realizing.
Everything I learned was, as Radhanath Swami, I used to tell him, because I wanted to be a writer in college when I first met him. And I said, I need to experience the world, Maharaj. I'll be very quick about this. When I was in college, I wanted to start writing my senior year. All of a sudden, I was writing everybody's papers. I said, I want to be a writer. I don't want to be a doctor of nutrition. That's what I had been studying. And a professor said, if you want to be a writer, either live a life worth writing about or find someone who has lived a life worth writing about. And then miracle of miracles, I met Radhanath Maharaj at that time, and I just watched him very closely, and of course, as with you all, fell in love with him and his ways, studied him very carefully, and realized he was that person who had lived a life. He told us all the stories. We used to sit around and listen for hours on end while he fed us. I forget what my point was, but the whole experience of I'm sorry, I'm watching some of my horses go try to break down some fence, so they were disturbing me right now. So I got to get out there. But once again, thank you very much for your class, and I hope to see you soon.
Jai
Hare
Bhima Prabhu.
Krishna.
I mean, Bhima Prabhu, you said a few things when I first met you that have impacted my whole spiritual life. And so whatever you've gone through, the pains and the things that have happened, I felt like it's also just showing that Krishna was giving you certain experiences and realizations so that this wisdom can just blossom from your heart. Because as I said, like you said, we only met a handful of times. But there are certain things that you said and communicated that have really stayed with me, and I feel very great. And I know how much love you have for Mirage, and how much love is in your heart. And I think Krishna has been with you through all of this, and I'm grateful, very, very grateful to you. Hare Krishna. Let's see, we have a hand from Athena.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranams. Thank you so much for the wonderful class, as always. I guess I just wanted to add something to Emily's question and your response. Thank you so much, Emily, for that. I connect with that very deeply, just given that I came from somewhat of like a perfectionist, I say background, but tendency. And coming into Krishna consciousness, I guess this idea of like, oh, we can be perfect. It's like we like the idea that we can be perfect, but we can be very hard on ourselves if we make any mistakes. And one thing that I've just to share that I've realized, what is your definition of perfect? I mean, the only being that can truly ever be quote unquote completely perfect is God, is Krishna. I mean, we're fallen. When one is perfect or perfects his life, it's in devotion to Krishna. It's not that you'll never misspell a word or accidentally do something. That's not the definition of perfection. And a lot of times these habits that we cultivate, it's all to be conducive and to help support our love of God. Those aren't the main things. These habits are meant to just give us a life that's conducive to God consciousness. And there's times when I've missed a Kaddishi. Does that make me, of course, that's a mistake. Does that completely negate me from love of God? No, of course, God is all merciful, and it's our intention not to make mistakes. But if we do, God carries what we lack, and it's the intention, and it's the, God knows our heart. That's the perfection. The perfection is in the love of God, not that we won't make mistakes. And I always think back to, for example, I mean, there's so many examples in scripture, but even like Shabari, who ate the fruit before offering it to Ram. I mean, what Pujari would ever do that? Like, that's not okay. But she perfected her life because of her devotion. So it's, for me, always keeping in mind that that's the true perfection, is my love of God, not needing to be absolutely perfect in every single one of these habits, quote unquote.
Yeah, thank you
Thank you
for clarifying that, Athena. Very nice point. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's the love of God. When the love of God awakens, we'll do and say, the movement, our actions and our movement is springing from that love of God. In that state of consciousness, everything is perfect. In our state now, we should just expect that there'll be setbacks and mistakes and hardships. But again, Krishna's examining the heart, the intention to return to him, the intention to, again, pick ourselves up and return. And again, pick ourselves up and return. Don't judge yourself. There's another self-judgment. It takes another form later. There's a false guilt and there's a real guilt. Right? The false guilt that I'm not perfect, I can't do this, and that's all a kind of illusory guilt, but it can destroy us, it can harm us, it can keep us down. But if we just don't judge, don't feel that kind of guilt, because if you look closely, there's a kind of pride behind that guilt, because we're upset that we can't perfect ourselves. We're depressed that we can't, the depression we feel from failing is really, it's the pain that I can't do this. I am powerless. It's the pain of saying I am powerless. But if we can admit that, and then cry out for the Lord, return to the Lord, go on with our service without resenting, then then we can start to face the real guilt that's there. There's also a real guilt. There's also, and that's a kind of repentance. It's a sad gladness, or you can say it's a glad sadness. And actually, we hear that in the verses here with King Yayati. There's a sadness, but he's also kind of ecstatic because finally some change has taken place. Finally, he's ready to surrender fully to the Lord. So there is a kind of repentance that is healthy and real, but it's not debilitating. It's not paralyzing. It's just a desire. It's like a longing to return to the Lord, and it's felt in the heart. And there's some regret looking back. He's looking back at his life, and he's talking to his wife, and there's some regret. There's some feeling there. There's some sadness, but it's a glad sadness because something now, a new life has awakened, a new understanding, a reconnection to the Lord. And that's the real, but we can only get to that real guilt, that real kind of feeling, that real regret. We have to get to it by what we talked about today as a kind of, don't regret yourself for all the little mistakes. The regret is more directed towards the whole picture and the desire to return to the Lord. That's where it is. Don't make it down here with your little habits and your little mistakes and your little addictions. Don't feel guilty for all that. Those are symptoms of the problem. Don't get guilty and don't make this an emotional battle with yourself and with guilt, with all these little things that you're doing. Those things are happening because of a turning away from the Lord. Right? So the repentant feeling is the desire, the longing to turn back, and the regret that it's taken so long. I haven't, the devotees, you'll hear songs of their kind of regret and their lamentation. But you should understand within that regret and lamentation, there's also a kind of ecstasy, because now I'm on my way of return. Now I know for sure God has been leading me through all of this. This was the point of my sojourn into the material world. This was the point, is to get the fruit of this realization. Krishna has provided it to me. I'm grateful. That's why I said in the beginning, gratefully defeated. We have to be gratefully defeated by the Lord. I think we'll stop here. I have to go to work. Nice to see all of you. Grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Nanda Bihari Prabhu.
Grateful to have you here. Thank you, everyone who contributed to class by hearing or by asking a question or sharing a reflection on the chat board. Thank you very much. Ghanashyam Prabhu ki jai. And you say Srimad Bhagavatam, Grantaraj?
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
yeah, nice. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day. See you tomorrow.